First of all, I feel like a real crafty bitch because I couldn't find any of my dark lipsticks, and I have, but between my giant trunk of Halloween stuff and just general makeup stuff, I have dark
hmm
lipsticks. I couldn't find a single one. Eyeshadow and lip gloss, baby doll.
Are you? I was gonna say that color looks really good on you.
It looks like I've been sucking on a raisin
In
as
the
I drink my wine through a
90s.
straw. Hmm.
Wow, it looks phenomenal.
Did you ever have like a goth idol in real life? Not like a celebrity, but just like a quote unquote grown up when you were small?
No, I unfortunately did not have the opportunity in the middle of Central Florida to
Um,
have that.
okay, well, I was in South Florida and I did.
Okay, but here's the thing is Tampa is actually like a really well-known hub for goth and all kinds of different artistic expressions.
Yeah, that's definitely the first thing I think of when I think of Tampa.
That's what I exactly. Have you ever seen never mind. Never mind. I'm going to go down that branch. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was just gonna say that I had a babysitter. So I'm talking I was small. I was babysat size, right?
Babysat size.
Babysat size, and I thought that she was so cool. She had black lipstick. She had dark
Wait,
eyes.
so cool for your parents to be down with a goth babysitter. That shit. I bet she was the best too.
Actually, I thought so because I she just was so cool to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I don't have a lot of my earliest childhood memory. I was maybe 5. And even that's sort of vague. But I do remember realizing and recognizing at some point that she just was never around anymore. And I asked not that long ago, probably like within maybe a decade, I asked my mom about it and said, "Whatever happened to her?" And she said, "Well, she brought her boyfriend to the house while we were out. So she was fired."
Shit. Like to y'all's house while you were
Mm,
babies. Ooh. Come
yes.
on. That's not
Yeah.
cool.
No, but it's like quintessential, very cliche on the nose. You know what I mean?
I totally do. Well, do we
Mm.
want to
I will before, let me, one more fun thing. When I was going to the Baptist church, I was friends. Put this on the timeline. I was friends with this girl who was beautiful. She was Barbie. I mean, she was like a little pixie of a person. And I thought she was so cool. And she listened to 50s music on Sundays only. And she had all these little things. I mean, she's so cool, right? And I'm in
What?
middle school, so she seems so incredible.
Eclectic. Yeah.
Yeah. And she nicknamed me Fancy. And I just was like, oh my God.
Cute.
Well, I remember we went to Walmart one day and we were looking at nail polishes and she picked up a black nail polish. And I remember thinking, you're going to have black nails. And she made this comment about how it was like very hot on the runway right now to have black nails. And I was just really excited for the excuse because
Yeah.
I'd really wanted black nails and her doing it made it seem very like acceptable,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
demure, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and that was my first time wearing black nail polish. Was with the Baptist girl that looked like Barbie.
The Baptist girl that looked like Barbie. That feels like a good
Baptist Barbie. She's had
Baptist
every other
Barbie.
role.
That's so true.
Yeah.
Wow. I Heather, I think that your experiences with the church were a lot more positive than mine. Dare I say, a little less traumatic. You're like, Barbie at the
Mm.
Baptist church, and I'm like, uh, mm. Hellfire,
I mean,
brimstone. If you're not a trad wife, you're a bad wife. Like you're
put that on a
bad.
t-shirt, honestly.
Yeah.
If you're not a trad wife, you're a bad wife. Sorry, love that. Can we make that our
Wait, that
first merch?
actually,
Is that
wait,
our
that
first
actually.
merch? Or I'm not a trad wife, I'm a bad wife.
Oh, there's a couple different renditions we could do.
I love this. I would put that on a pin. Um, yes, but I will say I've also had some experiences that I was
Yeah.
not a fan of. I went to a one-room church with my boyfriend in high school, and I had never experienced a panic attack. At that point, I was 14, maybe 15.
Yeah.
And so I did not recognize what was happening within my body.
Oh, we all remember our
I
first panic attack.
Oh Oh, it was the scariest thing I'd ever experienced because it there was no there was music, like I was invited to sing,
Mm-hmm.
but when it came time to pray, I'm used to, if someone's going to pray, either you're praying in your own brain, right? You're not sharing that aloud, or the preacher, priest, whoever is praying, you're listening. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
maybe you give an occasional affirmation at some point when it fits into the script, right? No, 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 no. Everyone simultaneously within the
No.
church starts doing their own praying, whatever their prayer is, out loud. And it sounds okay. You know how I've never seen The Exorcism, but you know how in The Exorcism they actually underlaid like the sound of buzzing hornets and stuff, and it's so
Mm-hmm.
quiet, it's like inaudible, but this was the audible version of that. It sounded like a million bees just
Oh.
it was I was sitting there, and of course, eyes are closed, heads are down. My eyes are up. I'm looking around. I'm looking at my boyfriend like, is this, what are we doing? Is this how, like, what? And I got no warning. He's not even looking at me as if to register, like, hey, you good? I'm having a nervous breakdown. If it finally stops almost as quickly as it starts, I was forever changed. That scared me so much. And I was not scared of the fact that people were praying. I was scared because I was not prepared. It's the
No.
scariest sound. I'll never forget that sound.
Wonder what that is doing to the nervous system. I've had a similar experience, not quite that, but a very similar one that I have in my mind, and I'm like, what is it about that specific instance where you're hearing that happening, the overlapping, the talking, the praying out loud or the singing out loud, where everyone is
I
not
had
in
someone say it
congruence?
really well. I had someone say it
Okay.
really well. Their
What'd they
son
say?
was recently diagnosed with autism, and we were talking about how, aren't we all autistic? It's a spectrum. Where do you fall on it? What are your
Mm-hmm.
things? And not in an insensitive sort of way, in case that upset anybody, just in like we could all check a box, right? I wear earplugs all the time. Like even
Mm-hmm.
at spin class, like I can't, it's too much noise all the time.
Sensory overload.
Way, 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 way.
Yeah.
And she said, it's sound without purpose.
Ooh.
Because I was like, I don't know, because we had just finished watching a movie like in a movie theater, and movies are so loud. They're so
Mm-hmm.
loud. And I made the comment of loud sound does not necessarily bother me.
Right.
But if I'm at a spin class or if I'm at the gym, if the music is very loud, I am unwell.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because I have someone talking over here and I'm hearing that and it's too much. And she said, "Oh yeah, well, I mean, any sound without purpose is just like too much." And it clicked in my brain really well that I was like, yeah, that's the thing. It's not like this is a loud movie. I'm in my car listening to a loud song. I'm speaking loudly to someone that can't hear well. I'm at a concert close to the stage, right? It's that's purposeful. It's the other stuff that's not.
That's a really good nugget.
Yeah,
I really
it
like that.
clicked for me.
Me too. Clicking it did. Clicked in. I'm also clicked into what we're talking about today.
Look at you and your little
You like
segue.
my
Me
you like my
too.
transition?
Me too. Okay, everybody. So this is our first special bonus episode. We can't have a podcast about faith and belief and culture and not talk about spooky season.
Halloween.
So this is our Halloween special, if you will. But I'm a nerd, and I feel like it's also kind of a nice recap. It's like a nice vocabulary review on things that
Mhm.
Jerry and I have been talking about so far, especially things like liminal space and
Mhm.
the veil in various thicknesses. And of course, if you've been listening at all up to this point, you know that the focus of our podcast is really to explore belief and its influence. Maybe
Mhm.
it's on culture, maybe it's on crime committing, but however it sort of manifests, the intersection there and all those pieces. And so, of course, this time of year fits that perfectly. And it's my favorite, and I think it's one of your favorites. So, Samhain, which looks like Sam Hain,
Mhm.
started over 2,000 years ago in what is now Ireland, Scotland, also parts of northern France. Not unlike Halloween as we know it today, it was celebrated from sunset on October 31st to sunset on November 1st. And it was one of four major fire festivals in the Celtic calendar. So we will be posting a picture of the Celtic wheel of the year on our Instagram so that you can see Yule, Imbolc, Austera, Beltane, Litha, Luanazda, Luanazad. We're not going to cut any of that because oops, Mabon and Samhain, plus the dates that belong to each. And I already told you that I think we should probably just cover all of these,
Absolutely.
like at every juncture.
Yeah, and this episode feels a little bit like a coming together. So Heather and I are doing this together. We're going to kind of trade
tag
off,
teaming.
go through a tag team. So it'll feel a little bit different. And it also feels a little bit more like, I don't want to say raw, but a little less, I don't know, maybe buttoned up. I don't know how to exactly put it, but it feels a little bit more.
This is you and I having a cultural gathering.
Yes, that is what I was trying to get to. Is it feels like a gathering, a teaching of, a coming to, a returning to, which is what
the culture
Samhain is all about. Yeah. And part of all of these things, it's so fun because I'm reading about and learning about things, and I'm like, oh, Heather and I have done that, or this is something that Heather talked about, or oh yeah, this is cute and fun.
Or in that one case that I don't think has been released yet, ooh, we should talk about this. Just kidding. Heather spent 15 minutes talking about this. So liminal time. I feel like you talked about liminal time first in your sleepwalking episode, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Which will be out by the time we do this.
Yeah.
So it's an opportunity where the veil between our world and the spirit world is the thinnest. I think in that episode I talked about it being where you have the best cell phone connection, basically. But it was also the one time where the dead could return to visit the living. Very much like Beetlejuice, right?
Yeah, love.
But not just the good spirits. I'm not putting him into that category. That was just sort of an accidental, but not just your favorite ancestor, right? It's not just grandma coming to visit you again, but the malevolent ones as well. Anyone could walk among the living. And so there are a lot of multiple goals going on simultaneously. You want to honor your dead, but you also want to protect yourself from all the other dead. And one way to do this was via offerings of food and drink left out to appease wandering souls.
And these were not just any food or drink. They were certain, treats of appeasement. I had never heard of soul cakes.
I've made them before.
I read your text and I was like, wait, wait a second. This is something that I want to get into. I don't know what this involves, but...
Oh yeah, this is right up your alley.
Yes. So there were offerings placed out for ancestors and wandering spirits, and it wasn't based out of fear, but more so respect. And so the first one we'll tap into, learn about, is soul cakes. So Heather obviously knows a little bit more about this than I do, given that she has made them before, which is so fun and cool. So they're these little small round cakes, which I have now learned are made up of these specific spices, warm spices, nutmeg, cinnamon, think allspice. And they're often marked with a cross. Did you do this with yours?
I made my little cross out of raisins.
Cute. A little raisin cross?
Yeah.
Okay. So they're said to symbolize a remembrance, a reciprocity, nourishment for the soul, and a bridging of worlds of sorts. And something that we'll talk a little bit about later is this concept of souling. And so these soul cakes would be shared during souling, and just as a little precursor to getting more into it, it's this time where people prayed for the dead in exchange for treats or in exchange for these soul cakes. Also apples, which are so significant. I kind of geeked out about this as well because...
Right, me too.
Apples are just through thread significant. And I'm like, oh.
Everywhere.
Yes. And I'm like, what? This is so interesting. And it's just so fun learning about, these fruit, these offerings, these things throughout even just like historical context. It's like, this came before before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait just a second. This sounds familiar. So, apples were used for divination games. So, think peeling, fire rituals, and specifically bobbing, which
I
is
lost my mind.
so fun. You
I
mean
don't
to
know
tell
why.
me bobbing for apples is ritualistic? That is so. We went bobbing for apples at your Halloween party
I
last
was
year.
about to say, and we're going to do it again this year. And so I like to tell on my invitations, I specify that it's pretty kid friendly up until 9. The children don't have to leave, but I am not responsible for anything they may witness at that point. And so I switched out the water from the apple bobbing and then refilled it with water and airplane bottles.
Yes. So the adults were bobbing for
Airplane
the
bottles.
tiny little airplane bottles. There was like Fireball, there's like vodka, the Smirnoffs, it was so fun.
And it was also just as challenging as apples because
It
if any of
definitely
you are
looked
listening and have
mhm,
not actually tried bobbing for apples,
humbling.
it is hard.
It is, what's so funny is that it's one of those things that you look at and you're like, I could do that. And then you go to do it and you're like, this is this is so hard.
It's the hardest thing I've ever done.
And
You're just drowning.
you are just like waterboarding yourself, basically.
Oh my God.
So we'll do a little bit about bobbing for apples. And this is something that I encourage you all to hold on to later. It'll kind of pop back in, but just for the sake of diving into it just a little bit right now. It's so fun to think about that it also has other names. So apple ducking, duking for apples.
I'm sorry. That's the only way I will be referring to it from now on.
Duking?
Duking for apples.
Duking for apples. And or a similar but adjacent game called Snap Apple. And so bobbing for apples merges two separate traditions. One is Celtic Samhain divination, and then the other one is Roman Pomona Festival, which I did not know anything about Pomona.
Me neither. And are we surprised that the gods and goddesses that we did learn about were mostly just the gods?
Right. Pomona seems pretty important considering that she's this goddess of orchards and abundance, and that apples were sacred to her specifically, and they represented fertility, love, and prosperity. And I'm like, wow.
Doesn't it just like it rings a lot of bells?
It
It's
kind
sounding
of riled me up a little
important.
bit. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm like, okay. So when Roman influence reached Celtic lands, the apples then became a symbolic fruit of Samhain. So with the Celtic Samhain divination, the belief is that the Samhain night was liminal, just like we're talking about when magic and prophecy work best, and people use everyday things, including things like apples, nuts, and fire, to seek glimpses of their future. So they're like these little crystal balls, which is like, what?
I just had an uncovered memory.
Okay.
I
Share
can
with the class.
remember being probably in maybe middle school, maybe younger.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard somewhere, who knows where, that along this same line, if you were doing it to divine some answers, if you bit into an apple and split it open and counted the seeds, that was like how many children you would have.
There's part of that is in here.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't read ahead to your part.
Oh my God. No, I didn't read. That's the other fun part about this is that we each had our own sections, but I only skimmed yours to know.
Same. I was
where
just
I
like
pop
copying
in.
and pasting.
Perfect. So it's like we're also learning from each other. But there is tradition that is talked about in here about specifically knowing and kind of like seeing into how many children you're going to have.
Well, I was doing it wrong because I know every time I did that, I was like, I know there's no chance I'm having 6 to 8 children. Okay, unless we're including, pets that I would have over time.
We can count those.
That might equal such an insane number. But
Yeah.
but I remember. I mean, in the same time I was reading, the American Girl doll book about puberty, I'm like biting into apples. Like, how many kids am I going to have?
Talk about a mixing of traditions.
That's my culture. Okay.
Counting apple seeds with my American. What was the name of your American Girl doll? I can't remember mine.
Well, the one I had was one that was made to look just like me. But my fun American Girl doll fact is that randomly, I because I grew up in South Florida, all of my community theater experience happened in Boca Raton with Ariana Grande.
Oh my God. You know what's so
And
funny? I thought the other day, I wonder if she's ever going to get brought up on the podcast.
it's a perfect, well, we're talking about American Girl doll in puberty because we had a sleepover at her house, and I don't remember if she had the book or if this girl named Brittany had brought the book, but regardless, we were all sitting on her waterbed reading it. And that's the whole story. That's it. But there
Wow.
you go.
Now we're adding a new so now we're crossing another tradition of like ancestral Celtic American Girl doll and current pop culture.
You know how all the American Girl dolls have like really tragic lives?
Yes,
All of
yes,
them are like,
yes.
I survived,
The famine.
yeah, or whatever. Um, this one would be, what would this one be?
Oh,
The Samhain American Girl doll.
it depends on what year she came to be.
Let's think about that. Everybody sound off in the comments.
What?
What's her trauma?
What's her backstory?
It's got to be traumatic though.
Well, by the time Christianity blended all these, festivals together, depending on your American Girl doll era that you choose, if it's pagan or, which I was going to get into that, but we'll get into that later. But depending on the era.
I touch on it too. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe your American Girl doll is bobbing for apples. Who knows?
That's how she drowned.
Yeah.
That's her trauma.
That's it. She drowned.
She drowned duking for apple.
Wow. Okay. All right. Wow. We could have so many spin-off lores. That's a good one. So traditionally, as we know, and as Heather has already described to us, you can do this with airplane bottles or you can do it with apples. If you take a large basin or tub and it was filled with water, the apples floated on the surface, as we've all seen. And then obviously participants would use their mouth and try to catch the apple, but no hands. Can't use your hands. So sometimes this is where the snap apple comes in. So sometimes apples, I have done this too at parties, which is funny because I'm like, when did I do this?
I have a story about this.
Tell us. Does it have to do with Ariana Grande?
No, but I had one year when I don't even know if I was in high school yet. This may have been like 8th grade. I hosted a big Halloween party at what became the annex at our college, but used to be an abandoned school. And you could rent it out.
The art annex?
Uh-huh.
Oh my God, fun.
And so I rented that out, and it truly was just an abandoned school. And I had a ton of different games, and including like the What Am I Touching, where I made people leave the whole room and come in one at a time blindfolded and like have to feel it, and like it was a whole thing. But one of the things that we did, and I didn't know that it ever had like this sort of origin story. We did this, but instead of it being an apple on a string that you had to do, it was a donut.
Oh my God. I've done that before. Wait, are we tracing the origin? Turns out we met when we were like 12. That's crazy.
Oh man.
When was this? You say this is middle school, high school? How old were you?
Maybe 13.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know. I feel like a donut would be easier than an apple, no?
Still incredibly hard, but yeah,
really?
For sure.
Okay. Well, I'm going to have to text my friend Morgan. I'm going to her Halloween party. I'm just going to be like, hey, suggestion. So, snap apple. Obviously, as we know, hanging from a string. Okay, here's the thing, too, I'm curious about. Do we wrap the string around the apple? Is it around the core? What's going on?
Do you know
there?
what's so stupid is that I love to build stuff for, and so I'm in my head going, okay, so probably what would make sense, honestly, is if you
it in
had
the core,
like a cup hook or something, and you're just like screwing it in the top, and you could go ahead and just hang it. It's dumb, but probably yes, they probably just tied it around
and hung it because they didn't have cup hooks.
They had a fishing pole.
Oh my God! So as much as we're talking about playing and having fun, it wasn't just about play. It was actually divination disguised as fun. So what Heather didn't know that she was doing at 13 while she was not bobbing for donuts, snap donutting
for donuts.
Snap donutting is that you were engaging in divination. Here's where it gets into a little fun lore about what that divination branches out into. So, bobbing for apples, whoever caught the first apple was believed to be the next to marry. I don't think I'll be bobbing for apples anytime soon.
What happens if you play alone?
They're like, that you just will
That
you
is
get
the
different
answer.
rules. That yeah, maybe so. So if you manage to catch an apple on your first try, your love would be true. What is your interpretation of that?
Oh, that like it would last. It's the real thing.
It's like true love.
Yeah. And you know
Mm.
what? Okay, I am divorced and famously
Mm.
bad at bobbing for apples.
Okay, that
Uh-oh.
part checks out. I
It
haven't been
does.
married,
Check,
but
check.
I don't know if I found any truth there. But okay. So, some versions are said that if you slept with your caught apple under your pillow, that you dream of your future spouse.
You know I'm doing that this Halloween.
Cat Heather with her caught apple under her pillow. So it mixed the fertility symbolism of apples, life, union, sweetness, with the Celtic fascination with prophecy on Samhain night. So the symbolic meanings stretch out, and so in the apple in Celtic and Roman symbolism is a fruit of, hear me out, immortality, knowledge, and passage between worlds. And in some Celtic myths, the apple tree grows in the other world, which I thought was so cool.
This is where I'm like, it's not even worth the tangent because it is, pun intended, low hanging fruit.
Literally
We're
low
just
hanging
gonna
fruit
move on
with an asterisk there. So the water
until we return to it.
probably in 10 other episodes. So the water basin is said to represent a boundary between these worlds. So looking into the water was like looking into the veil, which we've talked about. And the mouth catching is a playful, embodied way of seeking fate, breath, and life meeting the fruit of knowledge. So the game blended ritual, sensuality, and luck, and it was playful enough to seem innocent, but spiritually charged beneath the surface. So it later shifts, and by the 19th and 20th century, which we'll just tap into a little bit before we go on further down. But it was basically has become a staple of harvest festivals and Halloween parties, as we know. The romantic or prophetic meaning faded, and it was replaced by this wholesome competition. But symbolically, the structure stayed the same. Autumn, water, fruit, breath, and luck. And so, moving past the specificity of bobbing for apples, apples themselves were also, as we talked about, this symbol of fertility, wisdom, and this otherworldly knowledge that we talked about. And as we said before too, this Roman goddess connection, and then the symbolism of the fruit is this like life cycles, insightful, and harvest abundance. So some other things that were treats or offerings were honey, mead, and other drinks. So honey and mead were left out for ancestors or poured onto the ground. The symbolism is sweetness, transformation, fermentation, is this kind of like representation of change.
You know, that's also where honeymoon comes from, right?
No.
So for Vikings, they were given a barrel of mead, and they had basically from like new moon to the end of the moon cycle to finish that. And so that was like their honeymoon as we know it today. It was like that period of time where they were supposed to sort of like go be fruitful and multiply kind of thing. Yeah.
Whoa.
Also, I'm just going to jump in here and say that I love
Please
mead
do.
and I love treats. And whenever I pass, if I pass before you, Jerry, if you're not doing this, I will haunt the shit out of you. I want cakes. I want you to be pouring mead onto the ground.
I would absolutely pour some meat out for you, Heather.
Thank you.
There's also this like connection to liminality. It's this like continuation of liminality. So like think blurred boundaries, altered states. I was thinking about how, honey and mead and just drinks in general can kind of like, depending on the cup they're in, or if you're pouring it on the ground or a bowl, or you're mixing it with something else, or obviously at this time they weren't freezing it, but in modern times I'm thinking like, oh, you can even like, make ice with like herbs, and there's just so many different ways to transform it, then like have different drinks and offerings. So another one would be like different harvest foods, so meats, nuts, grains. So meat would be from final culls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like a culling.
Explain that to me.
So culling is basically when you have to kill a certain amount of your flock.
Yes. Okay. Got it. Yep. It's all coming back to me. Okay.
Yeah, and
in order to.
And Samhain is all about this like culling time.
Yes.
So we'll definitely touch on that. But Yeah, and it still happens. I mean,
Mm-hmm,
kind of a
mm-hmm.
bummer. But again, I would be a terrible farmer. We talk about that, I think, in a
Yeah.
December episode, but it's not for me.
Mm-mm, not for me either. Think hazelnuts, grains. So symbols of plenty and wisdom. Salmon and hazelnuts are both tied to Celtic wisdom myths. I didn't know that. Um, also, harvest foods represent sharing abundance and blessings returning through the cycle. And then, well, I guess just offerings in general are this representation of conversation between the living and the dead.
Hmm.
And so these treats that we're talking about now are very different, which we'll get into a little bit later, than the treats that we know and see today. Um, yeah, I love that the concept that like every little treat is like an echo of this like ancient practice or kindness. And so it's kind of like feeding into that memory of those who came before us. And it just is this such a, it's really inspired me. Learning and reading about all of this is, I feel very much so more connected to a type of practice that feels much different than what I know now to be Halloween.
Have you ever
And
watched
it
Coco?
feels, no.
Oh, girl, it'll destroy you.
Oh
It's so
wait,
beautiful.
yes, the movie Coco. Yes, I have. I bawled.
I mean, obviously, and I think we'll probably touch on Dia de los Muertos,
Yeah, we do.
but I think that same thread that continues, right, of saying, I have not forgotten you.
Hmm.
I am still thinking about you. I am
Oh,
still missing you. I am still
yes.
feeding you,
Hmm.
right? I think that that's what we see here in its earliest form is just, I have not snuffed you out. You are
Yeah.
still with me.
Hmm.
And that's why I think it's so beautiful. So I think, I mean, I'm probably sort of merging a bunch of things together, but that's why I do like to do a mantle and I
Hmm.
like to just like leave some of the food and the different things out there until eventually you
Hmm.
don't and then whatever. But yeah, I just think it's nice.
It is so. It just makes my soul like warm.
Yeah.
Feels good. So these offerings were made to ancestors and strangers alike, and we'll talk a little bit about souling a
Hmm.
little bit later on. But it's this concept of just overall that food wasn't just for nourishment, but it was in remembrance. And baking, sharing, leaving things out became this root of what we call souling. And this is when the prayers and cakes crossed hands in exchange for love and mercy across worlds, which is so sweet.
Yeah.
Um, so now we're going to get a little bit into, Heather touched on this very briefly just a moment ago, but core beliefs and practices that were further involved other than this concept of food, drink, treats, things like that. So we'll talk a little bit about bonfires and just fires in general, offerings to spirits and ancestors, and all of this. Which this is also like my favorite part is the dressing up,
Oh yeah.
obviously, the
Oh yeah.
costumes. We'll talk a little
And
bit about
we'll
that.
and we'll definitely post some pictures of sort of the earliest forms of these because
Yes, yes.
it's a journey.
There is nothing more off-putting than some early costumes. It's just
Very.
so scary looking. And we'll talk a little bit about more divination rituals and their purpose. So before we get to the costumes, though, let's talk a little bit about fire. So, Heather, how do you feel around a bonfire?
So good.
Mm-hmm.
So good because almost always you're with someone else that
Yep.
hopefully you like because I wouldn't recommend being around a fire with someone that you
So that you
detest.
don't.
But you're usually, sharing some sort of community sort of situation. And a lot of times there are snacks or food or music or,
Mm-hmm.
something. And it feels ritualistic, I think, to me, which I've
Yeah.
already said on this podcast, I like. Um, so yeah, I love it. Love it a
Yeah.
lot. I also
I
love camping though. So it's like it puts all these good, happy things together
just
for
all
me.
together. Yeah, there is nothing more. I think that's why I loved college so much is because we were always out in the woods and we were always around a campfire. It was just always.
You were. I was graduating early.
Heather was graduating early.
Heather was
We
taking
definitely spent
two
we spent
semesters
time.
worth of classes in one semester to
Well,
get out.
you know what's so funny is I actually don't remember. Wait, what year did you graduate?
2013.
What?
Yeah.
Man, my mind is melting out of my
I think I had to
ears.
walk with 2014
Okay.
because I graduated in December of 2013. But yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm just gonna let that let that log in the back while my brain figures that out, because that just doesn't make any sense to me. But anyways, I'll take your word for it, I guess. Well, while Heather was graduating early, I was sitting around fires with my mischievous acquaintances, we'll say. So fire was seen as both sacred and practical. So, of course, practicality, where warmth, light, but also purification and communication with divine forces. So during Samhain, bonfires marked the thinning of the veil. They kept away harmful spirits while honoring friendly ones. Lighting communal fires was an act of collective protection. Every household extinguished their home hearth and relit it. So they relit it with embers from the sacred fire, symbolizing renewal and unity. Ashes or smoke were believed to purify and bless.
Does that sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, let me say that again, but more slowly. Ashes or smoke were believed to purify or bless. Yeah, where else do we see and hear that up?
I've never seen it ever anywhere.
Never ever. People sometimes carried torches from the main fire around fields or homes for protection against misfortune through winter. I loved this concept of taking from the communal fire and going to light the one at home.
Yeah.
And then like also around your land to protect you. I'm like, oh gosh, just so symbolic. I love it. So fire was more than light. It was basically used as this spiritual shield. And that these flames represented this community, this communal sensation, exemplifying that every home carried the same spark of protection. And smoke rose as prayer while the glow warmed off of the restless dead.
Very similar though to I would say to smudging, right? This idea that the smoke will carry out the negative while inviting in the positive.
And protection. Yeah, definitely. So offerings to spirits and ancestors, like we just briefly touched on with all these fun little treats, that offers themselves were gestures of hospitality and respect towards the dead and unseen. They believed that not all spirits were benevolent and that some were ancestors, but others were, have you heard this before, trickster fae or lost souls wandering the veil.
Yeah, that last one's a real bummer.
Oh yeah, that one's heavy. That one's a heavy one. Yeah. We've touched on this concept of wandering souls quite a bit. So that whenever I was, kind of like writing this and thinking about it, I was like, wow, that is a consistent theme, as well as just what are your general beliefs about that, and what are people's thoughts. It's just interesting because I get different answers from different people. So offerings often balance this honor and appeasement. So it embodied these kind spirits, and it kind of, was meant to pacify the mischievous ones.
Mad at me, here's a snack.
my friends around the campfire. Yeah, don't be mad at me, here's a snack. That resonates. Here, have a snack. And just like Heather said before, these offerings were often left on thresholds. So think doorways, mantles, hearths. This concept of these thresholds is the places between worlds and places between spaces. So these gestures of feeding the dead were both spiritual and social, and that no one went hungry, not even the ancestors. I have heard so many different renditions of the origin of dressing up for Halloween, of just this culmination of stuff that I've heard from family, friends, folklore, reading things, seeing it in media. So the origins of dressing up for Halloween consist of, because the veil was thin, spirits could cross freely, but as we talked about before, not all of them are kind. Which is such a spooky thing to think about. So people wore disguises to hide from or confuse wandering souls.
I love that.
So blending in with the unseen was the vibe.
It's like in Hocus Pocus when the witches come back, and because it's Halloween, the bus driver thinks that they're dressing up.
Yes.
It's just like that.
So really early costumes, which again, we'll post pictures about this. They're scary as fuck. Even this era, we don't have pictures from, but the ones that, earliest photos we have are still pretty scary. So I imagine they look a little bit like that. Think animal hides, skulls, masks, furs. Practical materials symbolizing the wild transitional energy of the seasons. And then sometimes ashes from bonfires were rubbed on the face as protection. Heather's making a face.
I'm making a face. I'm not going to get into it, but I am making a face. You know what I was going to say though before the face was made
Mhm.
is if the idea is to blend in and we're putting skulls and furs all over ourselves, it's a little unsettling to think what they thought the spirits looked like that were coming over, isn't
I
it?
know. It doesn't really make
Because
a
I want to
whole lot of
picture
sense to me.
someone coming back looking like themselves, right? And
Yeah.
like, granted, maybe if it's a malevolent spirit, yeah, that, okay, maybe it's not human or whatever.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I guess I'm with that. But yeah, something about that makes me sort of like, oh God, did you know something that we don't know?
Well, that really is across cultures too. If you ever take the opportunity to look at different masks across different beliefs and practices, and it's like where, and even like ancient like drawings and stuff, it's like we haven't really seen anything looking like this. Is there something, just like you're saying, like is there something that we're
Yeah.
missing here, because my
And then the
senses aren't
podcast
picking.
turns into ancient aliens. And we're just like, because that was aliens.
It like shifts to us, and we have our tinfoil hats on, and we're
And
like,
very big hair.
that's Always Sunny in Philadelphia meme of him like pointing at all the little different things and that's gonna be me and Heather. Okay, so obviously over time things evolved, and instead of using real animal hides or real skulls, they were then created by paper mache, things like that, and more like clothing things that were symbolizing these origins. um, and these disguises marked both fear and reverence. So there's this recognition of the unseen, that they deserved respect. um, this made me unsettled to think about that the disguises were not originally for fun, but they were for survival, which makes Halloween feel very different. So a way to pass by the unseen, like we're talking about, by the restless dead. So you're like skirting past them and kind of like getting away.
I cannot stop the music video for Thriller from entering my head. I'm so sorry. But you know what? I feel like too, it's really funny because even if we carry that into modern day,
Mhm.
I do think they would be unsettled by a bunch of Spider-Mans walking by them. You know what I mean? They would still probably
Oh,
be like, yeah, that's something that came with us.
that's actually really funny to think about. That just as kind of weirded out as we are thinking about the origins and then seeing Halloween now, they would be like, this is the scariest shit I've ever seen in my life.
Right? Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
So a little bit later, we'll get into talking about Halloween costumes further. But everything about Samhain, fire, food, disguise, divination, it was about balance. So respecting what's gone, protecting what remains, and preparing for what's coming. So these weren't random traditions, they were survival stories written in ritual.
Yes. And there's a timeline to kind of put all this together, right? Of course, it's dense, so I'm going to try to keep it as straightforward as possible. So, someone, of course, pre Christian, pretty significantly pre Christian. So, before the first century CE, and like Jerry's done a great job of talking about, it was not evil, it was not dark, it was spiritual, it was seasonal. It was important for their agriculture because, again, we talked about the culling and the harvest season and what it represented, and quite literally the time of the season, right?
Mm-hmm.
But by the first century, the Roman conquest was coming. To be clear, this was primarily in Britain, not so much in Ireland where Samhain was happening, but the Romans conquered Britain in 43 CE and brought their own festivals, which had their own celebration of the dead called Feralia, and a separate day, Pomona Day, which honored the goddess of fruit and orchards, which also happened late autumn, but was a very separate event, but happening sort of simultaneously. So by the 5th century CE, we've got Christian missionaries popping up on the scene. Saint Patrick, ever heard of him? Started to convert the Celtic people in this century. And the church recognized, as you may have already pieced together by now, that some compromise may be needed.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than scrapping every aspect of Samhain and other pagan festivals, the church just sort of rebranded them.
Yes, the Feast of the Ancestors became the Feast of the Saints. Offerings for the dead became prayers for the souls. And the night before, the hinge between worlds was kept as a visual known as All Hallows Eve. Hallow, can you guys take a guess as what it means? Means holy. So it's literally the evening before the day of the holy ones. Same liminal night, same thin veil, just a different story told around the same fire. So it's interesting. For a while, it did work. The traditions coexisted: bonfires, prayers, disguises, feasts. People just changed the language, but not the practice.
Yes. And not to be outdone, they were like, you know what? Let's add a third day to this situation. All Souls Day, November 2nd. So started in the 10th century. So at this point, the Christian version of Samhain looks like this. All Hallows Eve, which would be October 31st, All Saints Day, November 1st, and All Souls Day, November 2nd. But pagan practices were still happening, just a little bit more in the light of like folk customs instead of paganism, which at this point is really starting to sound like a four-letter word. So bonfires still being lit, disguises still going strong, feasting, visiting homes, but instead of someone coming to your door asking for offerings for the dead, they're asking for prayers for souls. And speaking of souls, we've got a little bit more on souling at this point.
So it's essentially prayer in motion. So imagine the living carrying candles through the night. Okay, setting the scene. They're singing for the souls of their neighbors dead, exchanging cakes and blessings at each door. It was charity and communion all at once, a way to feed both the hungry and the memory of those beyond the veil.
Like the only version of carolers that I would ever accept.
Exactly. That, so fun. I thought the same thing. I was like, wow, I like this version of caroling.
I will open my door, we'll trade some food, sing me a little songy song, be on your way.
And we exchanged soul cakes. So souling was an all-Hallowtide folk custom rooted in that theology. The poor, widows, traveling clerics, and then later children would go door to door offering songs and prayers for the souls of the departed in exchange for food, drinks, or small coins. It wasn't begging. It was spiritual labor. Prayers offered on behalf of the dead, believed to shorten their time in purgatory. What an incredibly cool concept.
And also kind of crazy. I feel like, I don't know, is this the first MLM to be like, listen, my great-great-grandfather is in purgatory, but if you help me, and then you get two people to help you, and then they get two people each to help them, he's going to go straight to heaven.
This is so funny. You don't know this, but I guess this episode will come out before the one that I'm doing, but you asking the question of, is this the original MLM? I'm going to have to shift some things in an episode because I talk about this being the original MLM, and now I'm like, wait a second. Is this the original MLM?
Is this the first one?
This one's a lot more wholesome. So as Heather pointed out, the more households, the better, obviously. So each household participated. Giving alms meant good works and favor for one's own ancestors. So it was a blend of faith and folk economy, charity, reciprocity, and remembrance, all bound together. So what did it look like? So we know that there's people wandering around with candles. Soulers often carried lanterns or candles through the village at dusk, light guiding both travelers and spirits. They sang souling hymns or chants unique to each region. And you guys, I'm going to give you an example. I will not be singing it, but this is the Middle English origin example that we're going to go with. Okay. So it goes like this: a soul, a soul, a soul cake. Pray you, good mistress, a soul cake. One for Peter, one for Paul, three for him, capital H, who made us all.
It was two for Paul.
Oh, wait, hold on. Wait a second. This is important. What'd I say? One for Peter, two for Paul. Paul gets two. Good catch. So while these songs were being sung, they were also exchanging these fun little treats.
I mean, all things considered, not awful. Like if this was a sort of solicitation happening at my door, I wouldn't have the sign that says no solicitors,
no soliciting,
right?
Like solar's welcome.
Yes. And, it's funny that solar works so well as like a double entendre there, because solar, like solar powered, solar, like soul. Anyway, light. They're carrying light around. Anyway,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, I mean, there's compromise at this point. Everyone's getting along. It seems promising. Again, you've got kind of the all the origins, enough of it that it still feels sort of true, but without it being super uncomfortable for the Catholics to practice.
Mm-hmm.
But Protestant and English colonial control are kind of over this. They don't really
Mm-hmm.
want to find compromise here. They want to instill some discipline into the
Mm-hmm.
folks in the British Isles, especially those in Ireland and Scotland that are at this point under English rule.
Mm-hmm.
So they start making some rules. Public bonfires, discouraged.
Ugh.
Sometimes even banned outright. Like you cannot make a bonfire, which is so that what a weird rule.
Yeah. I think it
But
speaks to its power. It's like, okay, obviously this feels like it's doing something, right?
yeah,
So no more of that.
you guys are like hosting a worship right now. We can't have it. But in the rural and Gaelic speaking areas, it still had this kind of folk Catholicism happening. Samhain customs keep going. And obviously, it was only a matter of time before it was going to show up in North America. But it wouldn't happen until the 19th century, which actually sounds so crazy to say because that's the same timeline that we're telling some of the stories that you and I are telling on the podcast. Like well, that's nuts.
Mm-hmm.
But finally, the US and Canada do get some Irish and Scottish immigrants that are like, hey, you guys are forgetting to do these really important customs.
Mm-hmm.
Let's fix that. And fix it we did. So we're carving turnip lanterns.
Mm-hmm.
Guising took a shift to trick or treating, and the idea of Halloween is in full force.
So, with bonfires being discouraged, we are met with an innovative little portable version of the sacred fire, which is what we now know as jack-o'-lanterns. So it started out as carving root vegetables of all kinds. Oftentimes it was turnips, and it was an act of protection, remembrance, and my favorite, rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't have bonfires. Well, we're going to make it work in a different way. So these lanterns were very symbolic. So the light inside exemplified this protection against evil spirits and guidance for the dead. The carved face represented this and served as this talisman, frightening spirits away by mirroring them.
That's so funny.
So cool. And then the root vegetable itself, of course, is this humble connection, earthy connection to the harvest and to ancestors who were buried in the soil. And then, of course, where it was placed. So oftentimes, just like these other offerings, these carved lanterns would be placed on windowsills or on paths, just as much as like how you see now. I have this beautiful, I'll have to post this picture. My neighbor has this gorgeous like entryway staircase, and there's just so many pumpkins, and they're gorgeous, like all stacked up, and it's so pretty.
They're gorgeous.
They're gorgeous. But
so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll leave.
No, that's no apology necessary. That's welcome here. Depending on where it's placed, of course, is like this invitation to the friendly spirits. And then obviously, as we know, if we're going to be friendly to some spirits, we have to ward off the malicious ones. So served as a welcoming and a protection as well.
Coming back to the US, it wouldn't be the US if it didn't involve consumerism, right?
Mm-hmm.
So until the 1920s, candy actually wasn't really a focus of Halloween. Kids were celebrating more with mischief.
Yes. So I had learned a little bit about this before, but learning more about it just really was fascinating to me. So before Halloween was all sugar and safety, it was this night carried out with a little bit more edge. So kind of the total opposite of sugary candy is, we're getting into some mischief, quite literally.
Some illegal activity even.
Some illegal activity, which was known as Mischief Night. Also sometimes called Hell Night or the Devil's Night, was the evening before Halloween when kids just let loose. So they'd soap windows, swap porch furniture, knock on doors, and run. So the original Ding Dong Ditch. So it was playful chaos, and it was a tradition that actually goes back to medieval harvest festivals where a little disorder was thought to keep bigger trouble away.
I love knowing what the origin was instead of kids just being dicks. I have to say, okay, I I think ding dong ditching in this day and age is like the most dangerous thing you could do. But if I woke up and was like, where are my porch chairs? And they were next door and I would think that was funny. Like it would be
Yeah,
inconvenient, but I would sort
but
of
it's
respect
good.
the hustle of it. You know what I mean?
It's such a like a
No one's getting hurt.
no, it's
That's silly.
so what am I trying what's the word I'm trying innocent. It's
Yeah.
so innocent. Just a little trick.
Hmm.
So by the early 1900s, those pranks crossed the Atlantic with Irish and Scottish immigrants, as Heather was talking about, and took root here in the States. In cities, things sometimes got a little out of hand, especially womp womp during the Depression. So communities started looking for gentler outlets. They're like, you know what? This is not the vibe anymore. So the answer to this, well, it's what we know now as, can you guess, trick or treating. So the same exchange, you show up at the door, you get a response, but now the trick was symbolic and the treat was candy. So Mischief Night kept the bones of Samhain reversal and wildness, but later in the mischief became this domesticated and wrapped up in cellophane and then handed out in bite-sized pieces.
Right, because originally treats included homemade cookies, nuts, fruits, maybe a small toy, but
Mm-hmm.
not branded candy. Honestly, at this point, popcorn balls and candied apples, oh, apples are back,
Ooh.
was a lot more common. So even when candy did hit the scene, it only had like a 20-year run before World War II led to sugar rationing and candy production was significantly reduced.
Mm-hmm.
So Halloween celebrations were still happening, but definitely not like they had been before. But of course, the pause really just provided an opportunity for the candy companies like Hershey's
Mm-hmm.
to step in bigger and better than ever when that rationing that the Depression brought on had ended. So Halloween from the 60s to the 80s had pretty much completely lost any of its origin and is now just a commercial holiday. Candy brands are running seasonal advertising campaigns. Fun size bars are introduced, tailored specifically for trick or treating. And supermarkets and corner stores build Halloween candy specific aisles every fall,
Mm-hmm.
which is so funny because now, there's a candy aisle year round in
Yeah.
an American supermarket.
Yeah. And it just
But
expands when Halloween comes. They just tack on two or
like,
three
we've
more
got,
rows. Yeah.
yes, in caps and everything.
And they're like $50 a bag.
Oh my God.
So
Yeah,
expensive. It's
it's a
insane.
lot.
Yeah.
But that's, again, perfect segue because today, Halloween in the US is the second largest candy selling holiday after Christmas, and sales have regularly exceeded $3 billion
That's
annually.
so wild. When I read that, I was like, there is, with a B,
Billion.
with a B, wild. Okay.
Ugh. All right, so we've already established that we're kind of getting totally away from the real origin here. But when did Halloween become evil? Because we've talked
Mm-hmm.
about sort of the churches finding compromise and then sort of going, actually don't do that at all. But
Mm-hmm.
it didn't really have a reputation
Right.
until the 20th century. And it really took off when Satanic Panic happened in the
Mm-hmm.
80s.
Right. So when Christian missionaries encountered Samhain, they labeled it, guess what? Pagan, which, to be clear, this is a very important note here. It just means pre-Christian.
That's
Did you
it. I
guys
don't
know
know why
that?
it's become like
What?
synonymous with the word evil.
What the hell?
Like, oh, pagan equals witch.
So, but for the most part, All Hallows Eve existed and was observed by Catholics and Protestants just in their own ways. Now, that's not to say moral suspicion didn't exist. Stuff was definitely discouraged and banned, like we talked about, but it certainly wasn't deemed as evil or satanic.
Right. Because even in good old colonial America, the same folks who brought us the witch trials were banning
Mm.
Halloween celebrations, but not because they were demonic. Instead, they were saying, and no, 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 you cannot do that because they saw it as heathenish, which
Heathen.
I love. And again, post World War II, it became a very cutesy sort of holiday in which churches were even participating and hosting harvest festivals or trick or treat nights. But the first sign of a big shift hits us around 1970.
Yeah, so evangelical and fundamentalist Christian movements were on the rise. Televangelism was really showing up at the time, and some of these religious leaders started to call this a celebration of the occult. Ooh. Just because of its pagan origins. Again, what does that mean? Pre-Christian.
Old.
And of course, they pointed out to witch costumes and death imagery of their evidence. Let me take a big breath before I read some scripture here. Ephesians 5:11 have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness. Pamphlets, radio programs, sermons, all warning Christians not to participate. I'm not going to be reading Ephesians, but that was the that in and of itself was
don't participate in dark stuff.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
so this is the perfect lead up into satanic panic as we talk about it today. So Jerry and I have mentioned it on the, but only like that much. We've only said satanic panic. So let's chat a little bit about what it actually is. In the 80s, there was this growing fear that satanic cults were operating in darkness, doing creepy, ritualistic shit and sacrificing animals in the woods. And this idea, which as far as I can tell, totally unfounded.
Yeah.
Like I do not know what started this even now, but it's that the idea is that ritual sacrifices are primarily happening on October 31st. And candy and razor blades and candy is happening, and it's because Satanists are doing this.
Yeah. And despite widespread fear during the 80s, there is absolutely no substantiated evidence, and it has never been confirmed that strangers routinely inserted razor blades into Halloween candy during the Satanic Panic era. So scholars like Joel Best have combed through decades of news and reports and found that most claims were completely unverified hoaxes or misattributed to other causes. So even though stories of candy tampering persist, they've never held up under any serious investigation.
But that doesn't mean that things weren't getting very out of hand. Police departments were having to issue warnings about ritual crimes on Halloween night. Evangelical authors like Mike Warnke are calling Halloween a satanic high holy day. And even when satanic panic kind of chills out into the 90s and the early 2000s, the churches really continue to double down on their messaging. And so they offer some alternatives like Hallelujah nights, which I like. That's cute. That's sweet. Sermons are framing Halloween as a night when the devil rejoices. But if you weren't in a family listening to this messaging, then you were one of the families contributing to that multi-billion dollar figure that I mentioned that the candy companies were raking in.
Totally raking in.
So that sort of takes us, I think, to modern day. I mean, that's really where we wind up. We've gone through this whole timeline of what it started as, what it evolved into in its own right, what it was sort of forced to flex and fit, and then the sort of altogether abandonment of it into what we have today, even though, of course, the origins remain. We still dress up. We still go door to door. We still carve jack-o'-lanterns. We still have different decorations and lights up. And some of us like to put out food and offerings. But that really just takes us from the origins into the US.
Yeah.
There are still plenty of cultures that are doing their own thing and have always done their own thing. And I think that it's important that we touch on what those look like too.
Yeah. So we'll talk a little bit about different global folklore, some cultural traditions. So we're going to start in Mexico. Heather previously mentioned Dia de los Muertos. So this is a colorful ancestral honoring. It's a beautiful celebration of life and death, welcoming ancestors back for a brief visit. So this timing, very much so the same as All Hallowtide, is November 1st through the 2nd. So some customs involve families create these beautiful ofrendas or altars with candles, marigolds, food, and photos. So sweetbread is often left out and sugar skulls to symbolize the sweetness and cycle of life. Cemeteries are cleaned, decorated, and visited at night. Music and memory is completely intertwined. And the symbolism here is that death is not an end, but a continuation of love. Memory keeps spirits alive. So think connection, like Samhain. It's about the relationship with the dead and not the fear of them. So, a little bit about Dia de los Muertos. We could definitely spend an entire episode on each one of these because of their cultural significance and all of these beautifully just these expressions and celebrations. But we're going to move on to Japan. So, I believe it's pronounced Obon, is this Buddhist Confucian festival where ancestral spirits return home. So this timing, alternatively, is around mid-August, but it definitely varies regionally. Customs in here involve families lighting lanterns to guide spirits home and float paper boats or lanterns on rivers to send them back. So Bon Odori dances celebrate joy and gratitude for ancestors' presence. And so, just like other traditions, there are altars set up in the home and are refreshed with offerings, again, of fruit, but here some rice and incense. And so the symbolism here is that the light, it serves as guidance and respect, this joy for remembrance rather than mourning. And then the connection here is that it mirrors Samhain as this guiding flame and balance of reverence and celebration. And then we're going to move on to Cambodia. So Chum Ben is a Buddhist festival of the dead. It's this feeding and honoring of the spirits of ancestors and, quote, hungry ghosts, which has come up before.
Yes,
Actually,
yeah.
for you guys, it will come up in the future. So we'll get
No,
to that.
no, because it's in your sleepwalking episode. Won't that have
Oh,
come
wait.
out?
Is that where are we at? We're at, we'll have to look at our calendar real quick. That's episode 8.
That comes out, oh, it comes out 11/5.
So, okay. Well, in
In
the
the next
future.
episode,
Yeah, exactly.
in the next episode, we'll talk about it.
You'll hear about hungry ghosts. So the timing for this Buddhist Festival of the Dead is 15 days in late September to October. The customs here are that monks chant continuously to open the spirit world gates, which I thought was so cool. So families bring balls of rice and food offerings to temples, and it's believed to nourish lost or suffering souls. So acts of generosity and merit making ensure blessings of both the living and dead. And there's this compassion, nourishment, and release from suffering. And then this also parallels Samhain in the offerings for wandering spirits and this belief in spiritual reciprocity.
Well, and before we get into the rest of them, have you ever done or participated in any of these things that you just talked about?
I have a little bit in my own way and have been doing more research about my ancestral lines.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually just started making some food from a specific cookbook, a Puerto Rican cookbook. So I've been tapping in slowly more into traditions, like ancestral traditions. And instead of just diving into picking one, I've been intentionally going like, okay, I'm going to do the food first. I've been doing a little bit of other cultural practices, but this one has been like I'm inching towards it. So it's like, oh, what is my ancestral, my connection to my ancestors? How am I going to get more further involved? I definitely have dabbled my toes in very similar practices to these, but nothing specific that
Yeah.
we've named so far.
Well, my son goes to an only Spanish speaking school. And so every year for Dia de los Muertos, they invite everyone to bring an image of a deceased relative
That
or
is
pet or
so
whatever.
cool.
Yeah. And so they make an ofrenda for all the kids, essentially. And they'll make the pan de muerto that you talked about. They've made that for us before. But it's, yes, super, super cool. So I like that. I've also dipped my toes in, but in an appropriate way because I've been sort of invited to participate, right? And obviously you have that sort of by default. I don't. That's not true. I'm very Irish. So I guess I'm allowed to tie to some of the things I have done before in terms of like soul cakes and things like that. Okay, so let's talk about some more. We have, of course, All Hallows Eve, which would be more in Europe, and we've talked about sort of how we wound up there. But the idea is that before All Saints' Day, there's prayer, remembrance, reflection, and it usually happens October 31st. So, for those of us not just thinking about the trick or treating aspect, the church bells are tolled for the souls in purgatory. Families do offer soul cakes and light candles for departed loved ones. Some regions actually did maintain older Samhain customs like bonfires, disguises, and feasts. And so we do see this continued blending of pagan and Christian worldviews, which really honors the dead in this sanctified sort of form. So we see the direct Christian adaptation of Samhain, which eventually produced what we know it as today. There's also African diasporic traditions. So very big on ancestors here and crossroads. Ongoing relationships with ancestors and spirits as protectors and guides, which I really like. I think that that feels very metaphysical to me, right? That
Mm-hmm.
they're not lost and you can't only talk to them on this one day. They sort of stay with you all the time.
Mm-hmm.
West and Central African spiritual systems, so Yoruba, Congo, Igbo, etc., carried through the diaspora, and they make altars, just like an ofrenda, but these would be more like shrines,
Mm-hmm.
bovedas, with offerings of food and rum,
Yeah.
tobacco, water, candles. And crossroads rituals honor the threshold between worlds. And we have Papa Legba as a gatekeeper, which is in voodoo. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't think we
Mm-hmm.
talked about Papa Legba specifically when we talked about voodoo in my case, but
Mm-hmm.
certainly one of the most well known ones. And then, of course, drumming, song, and dance to invite spirit presence and healing. So the symbolism that we observe here is continuity,
Mm-hmm.
guidance, protection. Again, that one keeps coming up, reciprocal relationship with the unseen. And so we still see this Samhain thread of crossing, communion. This is a different language. It looks a little bit different, but it's the same sort of core goal. And we also have some
Yeah,
creatures
these are
tied to
fun.
these festivals.
Yes.
So in Ireland, we have the Banshee, and she's a spirit woman whose wail foretells death and serves as a reminder of ancestral presence and fate. She's the symbol of mourning and warning and is
Mm.
often tied to Samhain stories, which I didn't know. I thought she was just sort of a default
I didn't know that either.
legend, like
Yeah.
cryptid almost.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that she's tied to Samhain. And when we are talking about a whale, we are talking about like an impossible to miss screeching, wailing,
Yeah.
cannot be missed,
Yeah.
loud, loud, loud scream.
Makes me think of, have you ever heard of mountain lion? I'm sure you have.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what it made me think of.
But amplified, like I'm back in that church where everyone's praying at one time.
Yeah, sensory overload. And then we have
La Llorona.
La Llorona,
Uh-huh.
the weeping woman, spirit of grief, searching for lost children, which is just so just.
Well, she drowned her kids.
Oh, wait.
Do you know about her?
Hold on. Wait a second.
La Llorona killed her children.
La
She's like looking for them because
Llorona.
she drowned them.
Okay, I don't know anything about this. I know about Banshee, but I don't know anything about her.
Yeah. She drowned her children in a jealous rage and is now cursed to wander, eternally searching for them and wailing.
Ooh,
She's not nice.
That definitely shifts my energy. Wow.
Well, I know because
Okay.
I saw you be so sweet and sad, and I was like, no, babes.
That's not it.
Mm-mm.
Mm. Well, she embodies maternal sorrow, obviously. And cultural memory often invoked during Dia de los Muertos season. So
Yes, but more is like a watch out for her sort of thing.
And it's like embodiment of guilt, right?
She's like a bad omen. You do not want to see La Llorona when you're walking somewhere.
How do I not know about this?
That's why I'm here for you. It's okay.
Thank God.
I know.
Well, then we're moving over into Japan. Yokai. So yokai are supernatural beings that are sometimes playful, but also sometimes vengeful. So during Oban, spirits and yokai blur. Stories remind people to respect boundaries between worlds. So each culture personifies the unseen, not as pure evil, but as reflection, warning, and memory. So these beings sometimes remind us that the veil is thin and respect must guide how we walk through it.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really fascinating to look at all of the intertwining aspects here and how so much of it connects, and you can see really clearly where it sort of split off, if it did split off, and even if something wasn't inspired directly by Samhain, like these other cultural traditions that we're looking at, I think it's really important to recognize that the feeling and the intention is the same.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it's important to remember that this is, you should do this, I think, all the time, but this is the one night specifically set aside to really reflect on, honor, acknowledge your dead.
Yeah.
While also protecting yourself from the dead that you do not know.
So cool. So it's so, like we said before, it's just, there's something about returning to the origin of things that help it feel more rich, There's this
Mm-hmm.
richness to it that I'm like, oh yeah, that's the kind of stuff that I feel I'm craving so much more of.
Yeah.
Finding this the deeper connection with ancestors, deeper connection with self, this deeper understanding for what things were before they got wrapped up in these consumerism
Yeah,
kind
it's
of cogs.
commercialized, it's
Yes.
consumerized.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's whitewashed, it's edited, it's fear-based, it's all these pieces. And I think, yeah, that yearning to sort of get back to the root
Mm-hmm.
is shared by a lot of people to just say, okay, but what was it supposed to be?
Yeah.
How do we get here?
How did we get here? And what do I want to do with it now? Which is pretty cool. Well, happy Samhain, everybody.
And remember, the veil is thin.
Bye.
Bye-bye.